Thursday night. This is Attorney Amihan April M. Alcazar, the host of AAA Live here at the Education Channel, where academic goals are advanced and achieved.
All right, we'll go ahead here and get started because we have a ton of stuff to cover today. I am so incredibly grateful to be able to welcome you to today's Student Voice and Wellbeing Roundtable. We were actually just talking amongst the panelists here before everybody started joining that this has been one of our most well-received roundtables to date, especially for a December when, most people are kind of just at that point where they want to be checking out and not necessarily have the brain capacity to handle something like this. So we really, really appreciate everyone joining us today and are really, really happy to have you. My name is Gretchen Presley. I am a Senior Partnerships Director with Mentor Collective. I live in the great state of Texas. It is a wonderful place to be, although sometimes we are a little backwards here. I will be your host for today, and I am joined by some incredible panelists that you see on the screen here from the University of Texas at Arlington, from the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, as well as from Georgia Tech. So welcome you all. We are going to have a moment where they can introduce themselves here in just a little bit. But before that, we need to go ahead and cover a little bit of background. So this is our agenda. We are well into the introductions and background building stuff here, so I will continue moving on this train. I do hope you all will be able to stay for the small group discussions. We find that our participants in these small group discussions walk away with just an extended opportunity to collaborate and connect with fellow leaders from across the United States. We do our best to make sure that these groups are diverse and well represented across several different institutions. So it does really give you an opportunity to collaborate and learn from each other. So please, if you can, take the time to stay for those small group breakout discussions after the panel discussion. So really quick, as we kind of get going, I want to get to know you all a little bit more. I love to present in person. I know we are just now starting to kind of get back into in-person conferences. I'm curious to see from the group who's actually been able to physically be at a conference. Give me a thumbs up from your responses. If you have physically been able to be at a in-person conference. I am super jealous because I have yet to be able to attend one. We had some of our colleagues go to a couple. And so I am very excited for the conferences that are going to be coming up and hopefully can get to connect with some of you in the very near future. It would be at this time, if I was leading a session at a conference, that I would give you all an opportunity to connect with one another and just introduce yourselves and do a little bit of an icebreaker. So I am a former educator. I taught elementary school and I also did some work doing professional education with elementary teachers. And so one of the things I used to always do is kind of start things off with a little bit of a brain teaser. And so that's what we're going to do today. In the chat, if you will take a moment to go ahead and introduce yourself, take the time to share your title and where you're from. And then if you want, answer my little brain teaser here. If you have a particular brain teaser that you are very fond of, feel free to share that as well. And look at these smarties that are coming in here and given all of them. That is the correct answer. Every once in a while, I'll get to trick somebody and they say February because they haven't really thought about the question. So congratulations to all of you that actually got the all months have the 28 days. This also gave you an opportunity to be able to use the chat. You may have noticed that we are also doing a live transcription of this. We want to do our best to make this accessible to as many people as we can. So if you don't want to see that little live transcription bullet at the top, just hit the X button there and that will go away. But when the recording comes out, it will have transcription with it too. So if you feel the need to just read along, you're more than welcome to. As we kind of go in here, I would love to be able to see your beautiful faces. we are really wanting opportunity to connect with you and to see the interactions that you guys are having, to see your beautiful smiles. If you have a baby or maybe a fur baby that you're cuddling right now, it is absolutely a must that you turn on your cameras because we need to see them as well. You will likely see one of my big fur babies running through here. Cato, my 130-pound Mastiff, has had a very wild man morning this morning and has been running around like a crazy dog. So it's one of those things that I'll just go ahead and apologize up front, because when a dog that size gets a zoomies, there's not a lot you can do to stop it or keep it quiet. So please turn on your cameras. We want to connect with you. That's the short of that story. You have been using the chat feature. I love the fact that we are getting to put some names and titles and where you're from to these faces. So continue to do that. If you want, share your email address too. We do want this to be an opportunity for you to connect to others that are doing this work and really learn from those experiences as well. So make a new friend, share your email address, and connect with somebody. I'm going to first start out with giving the floor to our friends from the University of Texas at Arlington. I'll introduce Dr. Brian Saniel first. He is their inaugural VP of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. So Brian, I'm going to let you take it from there and share a little bit more about the work that you all are doing at UTA.
Thank you, Gretchen. As always, it's my distinct pleasure to partner with Mentor Collective once again, especially here in this inaugural role as Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion here at the University of Texas, Arlington, where I've had the distinct pleasure of being here for about 6 or 7 months now. Next slide, please. I also want to say that the University of Texas, Arlington is very privileged and honored to be a partner with Mentor Collective. And on behalf of Interim President Lim and the Leadership Council, the faculty, staff, and students, thank you all for being here today and allowing us to be engaged meaningfully in this national stage about student wellness and student well-being. The University of Texas, Arlington is a campus of the University of Texas system. As Gretchen mentioned earlier, we are located in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. We are designated a Texas Tier 1 research university, a Carnegie Research 1 university, as well as an HSI, an Asian American, Native American, Pacific Islander Saver institution. And we are the second largest university within the University of Texas system, and we are regarded as the 5th most diverse institution in the nation. Next slide, please. Our university is properly characterized as a majority-minority institution, and that is more than 52% of our students here are racial ethnic minorities from all backgrounds and walks of life. We are approximately 60,000 students strong, and that's on campus as well as in the distant learning apparatus. We have 46% of our students who are first time in college, meaning they have not, or their parents and family members have not completed a bachelor's degree previously. 35% or nearly more than a third are Pell eligible, low socioeconomically talented students, and 22% of transfers and 6% veterans. Next slide, please. We pride ourselves on being a student-ready campus, and as we go through the panel today, I'll be honored to say a little more about that. But primarily, our mantra is, instead of being a campus or a university that wants students to be ready for us, we want to be ready for students. We want to meet them where they are, support them with accomplishing all of their academic, personal, and professional goals and aspirations. Some of the ways that we do this is through bridge programs, the TRIO support services, and things that have been institutionalized here at UTA, and our outreach and engagement with local high school and junior high school throughout the region. Next slide, please. Currently, our graduation rates are somewhere between around 30% to as high as about 65% for our international students. And all of our racial ethnic minority populations are trending upward over the last 10 or 12 years to where we are somewhere around about 48% in graduation rate, 6-year increments. Next slide, please. Some of the signature programs that we like to discuss or share with everyone include UTA My Way. UTA My Way is a program that brings in students from different populations and demographics and makes sure that members of their community or how they identify, whether that's race or ethnicity or LGBTQ or first gen or individuals who might be financially challenged or whatnot, have an opportunity to engage these students in as prospects or incoming students about what life is like here at UTA, what resources are available, how they can navigate some of the landmines and be on a track for success. It goes over very, very well, and we are extremely proud of UTA My Way. Next slide, please. We've done a number of different programs over the years. I'm really proud about our commitment to $25 million in scholarships to support first-time in college students as well as financially challenged students. We've recently incorporated a diversity curriculum that all incoming or first-time in college students as well as new transfer students have to take. And we have institutionalized our Ideas project, which is working to make sure that students are able to succeed. It's really our pride and joy where we connect them with resources, programs, and activities to kind of ensure that they are getting the best out of the university and everything that we have to offer. And then finally, we're working diligently to raise the consciousness and awareness of our faculty. We believe that if we prepare faculty to understand issues about student wellness and student health and financially challenged and just all those issues that students may be experiencing or working through, that goes a long way in helping them to be successful. Next slide. And with that, I'll turn it over to my friend and colleague, Dr. Ashley Ferguson.
Thank you, Brian. Hi, everybody. My name is Ashley Ferguson. I'm the Associate Vice Provost for Student Success at UT Arlington. I have the privilege of working alongside Dr. Samuel. I want to thank Mentor Collective for having us today. And I'm so pleased to see you all introducing yourselves in the chat. I see a lot of folks that I know and a lot of folks that I don't know and hope to get to know. So again, we're really glad to be with you today. Next slide, please. I wanted to talk to you just quickly today about some of the initiatives that UT Arlington has that have been in response to the pandemic or that we've adapted because of the pandemic, and share just a few student success initiatives with you. So when we look at our strategic plan around that, really where we want to continue to celebrate our mission of access and continue to advance student success, there's been 3 areas that we have been really focused on as a campus. The first is around process improvements, thinking about how we can decrease advising wait times, how we increase the speed at which we admit students, how we can take a 10-step student process, right, and cut it down to a 2-step process, those kinds of things where we can really remove barriers. Some of the other things have been really looking at student transition points and how we provide support for them. I'll give a shout out to our student affairs office. They actually created an office that does nothing but support students in transition. They focus really heavily on transfer population, first generation students. We have a Community That Cares initiative that we're really proud of that sort of brings together all the various support mechanisms into one place so that students know that they've got access to those services. And then finally, really looking at the student experience. The initiative I would highlight there is our Maverick Advantage initiative, which is focused on experiential learning and high impact practices. Next slide, please. So we really do pride ourselves in taking a holistic approach to student success at the University of Texas at Arlington. And I know George, our moderator, we're going to talk more about the holistic approach to student success today. And so when we think about our sense of belonging, academic support, all of these things, they all play into how we can close equity gaps and further our retention and completion rates. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to highlight a couple of initiatives out of our Academic Success Center for you that, again, were mostly in response to the pandemic. One that started before the pandemic, but that we've really had to kind of adjust during, that we're proud of, is our Student Success Help Desk. And that initiative, that help desk, exists to really for students to contact when they're facing a barrier around that might impede their ability to graduate on time. So they may contact us and say, I can't get into this class that I need. And instead of saying, well, that's going to delay you, or you may have to find another class, we actually have staff that are kind of highly trained there to work the problem through to resolution. We may find a substitution. We may get an independent study going and fund it for the academic department. All kinds of things that we can try to apply there. Next slide, please. The other initiative I wanted to highlight was our Success U program. We did this immediate past summer to try to counter some of the learning loss that our incoming students may have experienced in the pandemic. So we invited them in with a little bit of financial support to participate in a pre-matriculation session throughout the summer with peer mentors and 10 workshops focused on academic skill building. We also gave them access to an academic coach so that they could build an academic plan for the fall semester. And we ended up having about 600 incoming freshmen participate in that. And last slide, Gretchen. The last thing I wanted to highlight was what we call our SWOT Initiative, and this stands for Success with Academic Timeliness. And with this initiative out of our Student Success Help Desk, we basically focus on students that have more than 90 hours, and we work with them one by one to find out what they need to graduate, whether that's financial support, housing, or other means. And we really look at everything left on their degree plan, and again, find solutions to make sure that they finish in a semester or two. And you can see that our four-year grad rates have been steadily going up the last couple of years and have had bigger gains since we put this into practice. Last thing I'll highlight is that in response to the pandemic, our social work grad students had no fieldwork placements to go to and needed those to graduate. So we gave them a placement at the university and had them conduct outreach to all of our students, particularly those with more than 90 hours, to see how the university could help with their basic needs. And the students actually functioned as case managers. So thanks for allowing us to highlight a little bit of work and at UTA. And with that, I will turn it over to George. Thanks.
Sorry, you get to turn it back over to me here. I really appreciate that really quick snapshot into how UTA is supporting students. I think that's really very mission aligned to the same work that Mentor Collective is doing. And so just to kind of give everybody here a little bit of background on Mentor Collective, I promise this will be quick. We are a group of leaders, of experts, of thought-provoking people that are really trying to help institutions solve the mentorship gap. And when we think about access to mentorship and how oftentimes students aren't taking advantage of those relationships, even though they may have access to them, we're really trying to help institutions figure out how to close that gap. We do that through these three pillars that we work to really incorporate into each and every one of our programs. The research side of the house is really looking at those best practices, at the academic literature that's there. It's also looking at the understanding that we have from running over 700 different programs and really fine-tuning, what is it that is working and what is it that's not working. And that's really where our services come into play. Our Mentor Collective team is working hand in hand with our institutional partners. Oftentimes, they consider us their mentorship back office because we are the ones that are working on those logistics that oftentimes become very time intensive, labor intensive, and to be quite honest, can be a huge undertaking for an institution to do on their own. Our team is handling all of that. We also leverage really incredible technology that allows administrators to be able to really look at their data and be able to fine tune their data to be able to see how are these programs impacting your student success metrics? How are they impacting different cohorts of students, like first generation students, like minority serving students? Those are the things that we are really helping our institutions to be able to think about. We know from this work that mentorship looks very different depending on where a student is at in their academic pursuits. We know that we have to kind of shift the way that mentors and mentees are matched based on the experiences in their current cycle that they're in. And so this is the work that Mentor Collective is really bringing to the table to help our institutional partners be able to do at a very large scale with a ton of support and access and really engagement from our students. We also know that institutions want to know that what they're investing in, what they are putting their time and their energy in is actually making impacts on their students. And so the research side of our work also is really diving into the impact our programs are having on leading indicators like sense of belonging. And we actually have a white paper that is out that looked at how students were being engaging in a way that it is increasing their sense of belonging, and the impacts of these programs over the course of a survey that they took in the pre, middle, and end of their program, and that impact that it had on sense of belonging. And you can see that we saw an increase of 14% there. We know that sense of belonging is that leading indicator for retention. And so one of the new meta-analysis that we have actually showed that our mentored students were retained at an almost 12% higher rate than non-mentored students, knowing that retention is one of the things that many institutions are really trying to figure out how to get those increases and how to keep students in the seats, how to ensure that they are graduating on time. This is something that I think mentorship can really help to elevate. So along those lines, I will now kick it over to George. I told you I would be short with this. George, thank you so much again for joining us. I feel like George and I are old friends here. Dr. George White is the inaugural managing director from Lehigh University. And he's really the one that was working with Mentor Collective from day one to help support Lehigh students. He has now since retired, lucky man, but he still gives his time and energy to this work because he's so committed to student success and the impacts that he can make even in his retirement. So George, thank you for joining us, and I'm going to kick it over to you.
Thanks, Gretchen. And go to the next slide if you would.
Sure thing.
And I'd like to have the panel introduce themselves. Ashley, say hello again.
Hi, everybody. Ashley Ferguson, UT Arlington.
Brian.
Hello, everyone. Brian Samuel, UT Arlington.
Samantha.
Everybody, I'm Samantha Rayner. I'm at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, and I serve as the Assistant Vice Provost for Strategic Student Success Initiatives. Great to see you all. Thanks for being here.
And Samantha, how big is University of North Carolina, Greensboro?
Thank you. We have approximately 20,000 students. About 15,000 of those are undergraduate students. We're characterized as a minority serving institution, high rate of Pell eligible and first generation college students as well, and are also a Carnegie classified community engaged university.
Thank you for that. And Charmaine?
Good afternoon, everyone. Charmaine Troy. I'm at Georgia Tech. To break down what our institution comprises of, we have about somewhere between 44 to 45,000 students. 17,447 are undergraduate, a little over 26,000 are graduate students, and 6.5% of our undergraduate students are first generation.
That's great. Thank you very much to our panelists, and I look forward. We're going to have a very rich conversation today. Among the many concerns across higher education, student well-being weighs heavily on 68% of university presidents, and it is their primary concern. In a recent survey put out by an organization called American Campus Communities, a survey of 9,000 undergraduate students and graduates, 76% cited this issue: re-engaging in academics or resuming a full course load to be their most stressful factor for their academic year. And student voice has become particularly valuable to our leaders in addressing this. As such, we're going to have, as I said, an important discussion about the state of student well-being, student voice, and how regular pulse checks of students are illuminating pathways and solutions for our campus, across a community across the country. And so, Charmaine, I'm going to throw the first question to you. Being a leader committed to supporting a first-generation and lower-income students, what resources are integral to support the well-being and engagement of this unique group of students? And how are you leveraging student voice to help move forward?
Thank you so much for the question, George. And again, I just want to thank Mentor Collective for not only partnering with us, but also inviting me to participate in this executive roundtable. I really appreciate it. So I'm going to jump right into your question, and I'm going to talk about the resource piece of the question. And so just to start talking a little bit about the research, just to highlight that piece. So research shows that first-generation students are reporting higher levels of depression and stress and anxiety on average compared to non-first-gen students. So we have to ask questions about why our students are seeking to self-conceal their issues, their mental health issues versus seeking out mental health assistance. And a lot of those students are citing stigma, the mental health stigma of seeking help as the number one reason why they're not seeking help. So for us, we must prioritize first-generation students' mental health concerns and invest in mental health needs by establishing first-generation student mental health research initiatives. I also think it's important that we create a culture of encouraging help-seeking attitudes among our students so that they will feel comfortable in seeking out these particular resources that we have on campus. Another thing I want to point out is creating inclusive support spaces for first-generation students and for students in particular. It's across the board. We need to create inclusive support spaces. And one thing I can point out about that is at Virginia Tech, I actually had a first-generation student support group that was for first-gen students, not necessarily to talk about their mental health issues amongst each other, but to promote mental health versus focusing on mental illness. So giving them a safe space to talk about things that are going on, that they're experiencing on campus, their journey, sharing tips with each other, finding camaraderie. We want to provide a space for that. We also want to provide culturally competent staff and training for administrators. So making sure that these students see themselves in the folks that they're getting assistance from. So more people of color being available or being hired to talk to our students. Also making sure that if they're not a person of color, that they are culturally competent in being able to address our students. And we should also encourage students to have, again, health-seeking attitudes and remove that mental health stigma. To answer the second part of your question about how we leverage student voices to move through these efforts, one way to do that is through mentorship. If you have a mentor who shares with you that they too suffer from imposter syndrome or depression and that they sought out help to address it, then students are more inclined to listen to their peers and go seek help because they've talked to someone that has actually gone through it and that, they are doing just fine and that may make, help them go and seek out that help as well. And if mentors also encourage students to seek out assistance or say, hey, I'll walk with you to student health, they may be more inclined to seek out that assistance as well. And again, going back to what I said about student support groups, that is a great way, again, for students to share their voices in those groups and their experiences, and just, again, help one another and promote positive mental health and well-being amongst one another.
That's great. And I know predominantly you've been talking right now about undergraduates. I also would like to bring the graduate student experience in, and you're the perfect person to ask. You've co-authored the book, Graduate Education at Historic Black Colleges and Universities, A Student Perspective. Can you share one or two ideas, strategies for supporting first-generation graduate students that you found to be successful?
Okay, so thank you for that. One strategy I think for supporting first-generation graduate students is, number one, helping them to navigate self-doubt. I myself, as a graduate student, when I entered my PhD program, I had a lot of self-doubt because I questioned my ability to keep up with the program. And sometimes you find that with graduate students, especially in PhD programs, I myself did not know what imposter syndrome was until I was in grad school, because I was perfectly capable and very capable person in undergrad and very confident about everything, what I was doing. But when I got into grad school, I was like, oh my God, what do I do? How do I keep up? Am I going to learn this material? Am I going to pass? Do I belong here? Because that's like what imposter syndrome is kind of in your head, asking you if you belong. So we want to make sure that we support our grad students through encouragement, asking them the hard questions about their pathway to graduation and what it is they want to do. And we want to connect them to people that can assist them in getting where they want to be, connect them to networking opportunities, and making sure that we are leading with empathy when we do talk with our graduate students and helping them prepare, and leave the door open for questions, because there are no dumb questions, right? So we got to make sure that we leave the door open for questions. Another strategy I would say is to support first generation students, graduate students, is to teach them to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because I'll give you an example of a story of my own. When I first wanted to start presenting at conferences and I submitted my first proposal, my proposal was eaten alive. I got some of the harshest feedback that you have ever seen, I think I've ever seen in my career. And it almost made me cry. And then there was another piece of advice on my proposal that was, more of like, here's what you can do to improve it, versus this paper is, this is horrible, you didn't do this, and this. So we have to not take it personally. We need to reframe how students think about critical feedback from faculty members and not take it to heart. But again, like I also said, lead with empathy. You want to, when you are given that feedback, just think about how can you assist them in improving versus tearing a student apart. But also see that feedback, students, as a way of thinking or challenging yourself to think more deeply, and make sure you are seizing opportunities that may be beyond your comfort zone. Because if you want to do well in this particular field or any field that you're going into as a graduate student, then you've got to go outside of your comfort zone. Great.
Good advice, and I appreciate that targeted focus on graduate students also. Ashley, the COVID-19 pandemic brought so many new challenges, and leaders were often tasked with executing in the moment and putting out fires that instead of focusing on their longer-term strategic vision. We now have a tremendous opportunity to prepare for the next decade, and many institutions are responding with new approaches and offerings. So how have you responded from your role and your team's role to the growing shift in students' hierarchy of needs and their expectations? And how has this informed your long-term student success strategy?
Thanks, George. I hate to follow Charmaine because that was fantastic. Thank you, Charmaine. I'll be comfortable with being uncomfortable and jump in here. So thanks, George. First of all, just a quick shout out, to many units and institutions at UT Arlington that really focus on, students' hierarchy of needs. We give out emergency grants. We have emergency housing. We have a food pantry, right? We're kind of doing all those best practices that are so critically important for students to even be able to focus on their academics, right? They have to have those needs met. So again, kudos to my colleagues working on those things. I'll talk about a couple of other things at UTA. Naturally, like all of you, I suspect we've really been looking at access to services. So different modalities, different hours, different methodologies of how we provide services through technology. And what continues to emerge for us over and over is that limited time and limited resources means that we really have to apply ourselves in a far more strategic manner if we're truly going to close equity gaps. So to that end, there's a few areas that we've really been highly focused on as of late. And we may not traditionally think of some of these things maybe lower on the hierarchy of needs, but they're really critical in terms of student success. One area that Brian mentioned earlier is how we continue to improve in being a student-ready institution instead of placing the burden on our students' shoulders to be college ready. COVID-19 really forced us to look at, how our policies and practices affect student success. For example, in the pandemic, we had more students enroll late on the order of thousands of students in the month of August, right before classes start, than we ever had before. And our data shows that that does not bode well at all for student success and retention. So now we're asking ourselves how our own practices can be tweaked so that we can shift that student behavior toward earlier enrollment. And then, like many of you, right, we're now looking more closely at our high DFW rate courses. Learning loss has really forced us to look more closely at those. Why are we teaching our less prepared students in exactly the same way that we and structure as we teach our highest achieving students? And we're hoping that they all pass. We're hoping for the same outcome for all of them. It's an illogical approach. It makes no sense. So to really work on any of these things, I can tell you that our data operation has had to quickly become more savvy, and it's more important than ever. And so I would say investment in data and your analytics operations is an extremely key long-term strategy. And then I'll say that again on learning loss, for an institution of our size and one that celebrates our mission of access, we do have students enrolling in developmental education courses, and that's a reality for us. Between learning loss, test optional admissions, and other factors, we've seen a huge swing and increase in the students enrolling in developmental education, again, which unfortunately our data indicates does not bode well for student retention.
Yeah.
So now we're placing ourselves under a microscope, George, and really asking the difficult question of, did we serve our students well? Were we anticipatory enough that was going to be an effect of, some of the things in the pandemic? And so that introspection and learning your own lessons and having a frank conversation about your own responses, I think is really critical for your long-term strategy to succeed better in the future.
That's helpful. I couldn't have said it better. And using the data to guide your actions and actually realizing that you have to ramp up your data analytics is something that I think many of us have learned coming as we've gone through the pandemic that may help us move forward as we continue to plan. So thank you for that, Ashley. Samantha, you've shared in the past that UNCG's culture of care is a point of pride and a critical component of your student success efforts. As a large public university with over 5,000 transfer students, let me say that again, over 5,000 transfer students. How do you think about creating opportunities to deepen the connection and belonging to UNCG? How does partnering with companies like Mentor Collective and others support you in this effort?
Yeah, great point. Thanks for pointing out that stat too, George. Our transfer students make up year for year about 40% of our undergraduate population. So it's a big chunk of our students. And certainly sense of belonging is an issue, across the board, but really for transfer students. So there's, I'm going to talk about what we do and what we'd like to do, because I think those are two different buckets. Our culture of care has really been around traditionally more of the psychosocial supporting, and it's one-to-one. A student shows up and they have an issue, and our approach is, we've got to make this right for the student. What can we do to support the student? And I'm going to use a term that our Vice Chancellor for Enrollment Management has started using, which is extending that culture of care to our business of being a student. And what that means is the transactional things. When a student shows up in the cashier's office or at the registrar's office, or some of those offices where you don't necessarily think about them as student success, but really do play a key role in a student's experience at your institution, we're trying to push the envelope and extend that culture of care, that student-centered approach toward those kinds of areas as well. Okay, so what are we doing for our transfer students? Certainly transfer to transfer mentors, which is what we've branded our Mentor Collective program here at UNCG, is one way that we're helping to increase that sense of belonging. And we're using our returning transfer students or continuing transfer students to serve as mentors to our incoming transfer students. And really helping them to connect to resources and just understand, how do you navigate the institution, and also understand that they're not alone in their transfer experience.
And
we've been talking.
They have somebody who's walked in their shoes.
Absolutely.
Right before them, who's close enough in age. That's an interesting approach. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. We've asked our transfer students very recently, at what point do you start to identify as a UNCG student and you're no longer a transfer student? This was a question we asked because there was some debate as we're thinking about serving transfer students. How long do we want transfer students to think of themselves as a transfer student? And our students really expressed to us that they hold on to that transfer identity as a piece of their identity, right? It's one of the intersectionalities of who they are. They want to remember their heritage, if you will, and their academic journey. And I've been trying to push our newly established TAC, which is our Transfer Advisory Council, a group of representatives from across campus that have come together to really think about the transfer student experience, to challenge us to say, if a transfer student chooses to hold on to that identity because it's who they are, it's a piece of who they are, and they want to remember that, fantastic. What we don't want is a university that reminds them that they're transfer students at every point in their career, right? They come up to a barrier and it's different for you because you're a transfer student. You are now othered because we have a different set of processes for you. That's where we don't want students to hang on to their transferness, because we're reminding them instead of them honoring a piece of their journey. So I think the Transfer to Transfer Mentors program is certainly, Mentor Collective is adding some capacity for us that we did not have. We could not administer this program on our own. So I'm so grateful that we have partnered with them to give this resource to our students. They are making connections with one another and they are leveraging their mentor, a very active program. So we're excited to see that.
So as you think about, especially in relationship to your transfer, I mean, your transfer student population is larger than many of the institutions that are on this call. And so you bring some real expertise. What metrics are you currently using to help you define success, and which ones are you thinking about as you move forward?
Yeah, great question. For the transfer to transfer program in particular, we are measuring sense of belonging, and we're measuring things like resource awareness. So we want
I'm going to interrupt for a second. How are you measuring sense of belonging? What
Great question.
criteria?
We are using Strayhorn's actually measure of sense of belonging. It has several different constructs in it, so we can pick apart how students are perceiving their belonging in the classroom with faculty support, peer support, isolation. So we're really getting a holistic view of that sense of belongingness, and not just sort of the one kind of question you see in a survey that's linked to sense of belonging. So we administer that to both the students who are serving as mentors and mentees, and then a group of students who didn't opt into the program, right? So we've got a comparison group there. And we do that in the fall and the spring. This is the first year that we've done that. We've just concluded our fall data gathering, and I'm so excited to see what spring brings. We're already starting to see some interesting trends, but I think it's too early to share any of those findings yet until we have a spring comparison. So that's one way we're measuring sense of belonging. Other transfer metrics, I want to see credit applicability. When students are transferring in, how are we applying their credits? Are they going to general electives, or are they going to degree requirements? How long is it taking students to graduate? We have a comprehensive articulation agreement in North Carolina for all community college transfer students. So theoretically, they should have 2 years when they get to us. That's not the case. So how do we shorten that gap? And then also, how are students disproportionately graduating or not, based on race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, et cetera?
That's helpful. I really appreciate that. And if you have an opportunity in the chat box to put the instrument or the approach that you're using, that would be real helpful to the participants on the
Absolutely.
call. Thanks. Brian, you bring some real expertise in the area of DE&I, and we're dealing with sort of a triple crisis over these last couple of years. We have COVID, we have sort of the general systematic racism that the country is always involved in, and then the inequities in higher education have really started to be spotlighted. So we know promoting DE&I concepts and advancing institutional practices often requires influencing institutional agenda, tracking the resistance to these things, and advancing cross-cultural collaboration. So what I'd like you to do is to help us by telling us more about how someone in a role like yours, a leadership role, moves the concepts of inclusive student success practices across campus, not just within a DEI silo, but across the campus. And what role does or should student voice play in those processes?
I would love to tell you that resistance is futile, but there are times when resistance can win out. But yeah, to your question and to your point, this work is very broad, right? And it requires a lot of dexterity, to say the least. And I began, my efforts in moving the needle in this work by trying to precondition the university for success by helping them understand that we have to meet students where they are, right? Students are going to come to your university and they're going to bring their whole selves. And in 2021, we are no longer, or students are no longer interested in forming alter egos just so they can have a sense of belonging. They don't have to do that anymore. They can go to other institutions. So if you don't treat them well, if you don't engage them well and meaningfully, then you're going to lose them. They're going to go to other places because they don't have to be here. We are student driven by demands and things of that nature. And as you said, they need to have a voice. They must have a voice. They want to have a voice. Students today are operating from the mantra that, they don't want institutions to do anything without their input, right? Nothing about us without us. And you'll hear that almost in any institution or university that you step foot on. I try to help my colleagues and leaders understand and value the institution's role in the carnage of attrition, because we have some roles. We have some things. One of the things that that Dr. Ferguson and I talked about when I first got here at UT Arlington was, something as simple as verbiage, right? When you think about sense of belonging, and yet you tell students that they are undecided or that they are undeclared, right? How does that help with a sense of belonging? What if we use some more positive verbiage like I'm declaring or I'm exploring, right? or something to that effect that gives them some degree of connectivity and a conduit to understanding what field of study that they want to be in. So I really work to have leaders, thought leaders, opinion molders in the different departments, units, and things of that nature to understand that we got to discontinue practices that don't make sense, that don't help us, that lead to attrition.
And language matters. Language does matter. I really appreciate you pointing that out because what we think we're saying and what our students are hearing may be two different things.
Yeah, that's right. We also think about stuff like practices like the law of meritocracy. We give people opportunities for research or study abroad based on grade point averages or monies that, people can afford to spend. And if I'm a first generation Pell eligible, low income student, right, and I can't come up with $5,000 in a passport to go study abroad and engage in some of these impact learning type things, then we've got to understand that we have a role in this, right? And we are systematically keeping students out or making them feel like they don't belong, right? Or like they can't meaningfully engage and capitalize on everything that the university have to offer. So understanding all of those things.
That's helpful. I appreciate that, Brian. Thank you. What I want to do, we're monitoring our time and making sure that we stay on track. So I'm going to move around. This is for the panelists, so stay with me a little bit. Samantha, I want to jump back to you again. You mentioned your engagement with Mentor Collective. MC analysis found that your transfer students report of higher, what we call insight flags. These are areas of concern or that the mentors actually report out with their interaction with the mentee. They tend to be higher than our typical benchmarks, which indicate that transfer students need more support now more than ever. How are you and your team leveraging these flags and data collected on Mentor Collective platform to ensure and sustain that your student success effort and that you're using this information to inform your future strategies?
Yeah, great question. We also have an early warning system called Starfish that uses that same terminology of flag. So I think I absolutely agree with you. Transfer students do need more support than ever. All students need more support than ever. Yeah. But I think for our students, they do know what that term flag means. They know that if I raise this, someone's going to help. Someone's going to come to the rescue. So I think that might play into why our mentors are using that feature maybe more than other institutions. But what are we doing with
Brian's point, language matters.
Language matters.
If everybody
Absolutely.
On the campus understands a term to mean a certain thing, then we're moving in the right direction.
That's right. Okay. We have a new provost, and she's really pushing our faculty to increase their utilization of our Starfish flags, as well as other groups on campus. So not just faculty, but other groups as well. And we are working to create a cohort in Starfish for our Mentor Collective participants, our transfer to transfer participants, so that we can, when we see an actionable flag in Mentor Collective's platform, transition that to our Starfish platform so that it triggers all of the notifications and referrals and things that Starfish can leverage, but also really help us close the loop with folks who are providing services to these students and collect information about the kinds of supports that our transfer students are needing the most. So really doing that piece across the university, but the Mentor Collective flag is helping us understand the challenges that are most prevalent with our transfer students so that we can aim our resources as limited as they are in the most pressing need areas. Try to be a bit more strategic about that. And we're doing that both with our transfer students, but also writ large at the university.
That's really helpful. And take away from that you're using data, both individual and collective data, to not only address the needs of a specific student, but to inform future practice so that you can decide what we're currently doing that we should stop doing, or what we're not doing that the student data is telling us we should start to do.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a real important takeaway, that we not only, and you mentioned it earlier, that we not only focus on the individual, which we need to, but we look at the collective group of individuals to help guide future practice. And I really appreciate you raising that. That's helpful.
Right. And where might we need to build capacity?
Yeah, and that's exactly right. How do we spend the resources that we get to build that capacity? Where's the best place for our dollars as we move forward, or our time? Thank you. Brian, I'm going to come back to you real quickly. How have you proactively used student feedback and or created a process to identify and better support the unique needs of BIPOC students and ensure they have access to the various resources they need in order to be successful?
Well, a number of things come to mind, in addition to things like surveys and focus groups, although surveys more often than not are kind of after the fact. One of the things that we try to do is engage our students in a student DEI type of committee, right, that kind of comes together and gives us input about experiences, concerns, opportunities for growth and improvement for the university, by having them just kind of share with us, right, the thought leaders and the decision makers here at the university, being myself, the co-chairs of the DEI committee, and others as well. We also do something called Pizza with the President, and Pizza with the President goes over very well. It gives us an opportunity for entertaining questions, providing feedback, and engaging students about their concerns. We'll do a couple of those each semester, and students know that that's their opportunity for having the executive team of the university front and center, right? And they will ask us, and they'll put anything in front of us, right? Dr. Ferguson and I are usually attendees there, and they may ask us everything from student fees to tuition to, what we're doing about courses, or just almost anything. And they love it. They really look forward to that meaningful face-to-face interaction and exchange of information. One of the places that we see a lot of missed opportunities, if I could say it that way, is that when universities or institutions go down the road of responding to or understanding students' concerns, there's not always that feedback opportunity that comes from the university to students. And so you're working on things, but it's kind of behind the scene, and the narrative becomes that nothing has happened. You haven't done anything, right? So what we try to do is try to make sure that we are engaging them consistently and regularly, in a face-to-face type of format, so that they know that what work is going on, or what accomplishments have been made, or progress toward accomplishing any of those goals or concerns, or addressing them the way that they need it.
So what I hear is a nuance, and that is communication really needs to be two-way. And instead of just talking at or telling people what we're doing, or just soliciting feedback through surveys and other pieces, there is a dialoguing process that takes place, a talking with, so that exchanges of ideas go back and forth. Did I capture that correctly?
Absolutely. A meaningful engagement, face-to-face, you're going back and forward, and, a lot of times you'll find that there's something that you need to follow up on, or what have you, but you're in that moment, and students know that you're doing the work.
Yeah. So let me tease that a little bit further then, and that is ask you to think about some of the best practices or practices that leaders can implement to collect the data needed to better understand the unique gaps and experiences of all students that often get lost in when we aggregate data, right? Yeah. I mentioned a survey earlier, and that's aggregate data. There's nuancing in that. So you have some ideas that you can share with the group?
Yeah, as you mentioned, disaggregating the data and trying to understand it. A lot of universities operate from an ideal that one size fit all, and that's not true, right? The different student demographics, populations, and entities will have their own needs and concerns, right? Sometimes they'll be, transformative, or they'll cross over into other populations and demographics. And sometimes they're uniquely germane to that particular population. So I think it's also important to engage subject matter experts, right? You talked about being siloed in the DEI space. One of the things that we don't do, right, is think that we got all the answers and we're going to just go out there and try to engage students or, tackle this work in and of ourselves, right? We engage our partners, our subject matter experts in student affairs and academic success, and, people who can help us do a real good job trying to understand what questions to even ask, right?
Yeah.
And who are those areas of primary responsibility that need to be at the table in shaping and figuring out what we're going to do and how we're going to do it.
Great. I want to alert the folks that are on the call as non-panelists, but as participants, that if you have a specific question that you'd like to address to any of the panelists, they've been monitoring the chat box, and also so have I, but you're welcome to put it in, and in a couple of minutes, I'm going to have an opportunity to call on a few people. So if you have some questions, you don't have to write the question. You can just say, George, I have a question that I'd like to ask for Ashley. And then when I get a chance, I'll call on you to pull you in. Okay. So Charmaine, I want to bring you back into the conversation. You gave us a really good opening in terms of broad ideas and general ideas. I understand that your campus, Georgia Tech, has also invested heavily in a mentoring program. You offer mentorships to your first year students, your first generation students, your transfer students. What are you planning to address? Are there specific targeted goals that you want to address with your mentorship program in this coming year? And how does this fit into your overall plan for supporting first generation students and their success?
Sure. So our metrics for success, we had a couple of those. Number one, the number of mentoring relationships. Our year one goal was to have 100 pairs, and we have 117 pairs that are successfully matched. And another one of our metrics is high impact engagement and outcomes. So we have 67% of our pairs that are currently reporting at least 3 conversations since August 2021, in comparison of the benchmark of 41%. So we have a lot of students that are engaging. So that's fantastic. And we are really excited about the high level engagement that's going on. What I was really proud of was to see how many of our students that want to be mentors. A lot of them have mentioned that they wish this program was here when they first started, and they wanted to be able to be there for students and mentor. And mind you, our mentors are not getting paid. It's out of the kindness of their hearts. And we had so many mentors that signed up to mentor, and they're doing a phenomenal job. And another one of our metrics of success was the participants' high satisfaction, the impact of first-gen students' greater sense of belonging. So our satisfaction rate, and we get this by doing surveys and testimonials. The mentor satisfaction is the average is a 6.5 out of 7, and the mentees is a 6.4 out of 7. So everyone is very satisfied with their relationships with the pairs. And another key thing that we wanted to really look at, and we wanted to see how many former mentees return as mentors. in our upcoming year 2. And so I've been chatting with some of my students that are mentees, and a lot of them have already said, yes, I'm going to sign to be a mentor because my mentor has been so great to me. And a good number of students have just talked about how awesome and outstanding their mentors have been to them. And we have a great video testimonial that's up on our website right now about, it was from a mentee whose mentor has done just absolutely phenomenal work with her. And she's very excited, and she actually talked about becoming a mentor herself.
Yeah, I had a chance to view that the other day. Those of you in the participant group, if you really want to get a sense of what a student mentor-mentee relationship looks like, the voice of the students really help us understand that. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. Ashley, I want to bring you back in. You sit at a very interesting perch in the Vice President's office, especially for the academic side. You know, as we think ahead, we know that innovation and disruption tend to be critical drivers of growth and success. In successful organizations, there's research. There was a study done that was published in the Harvard Business Review a couple of months ago that talks about disruption helps move organizations forward as a driver of success. Forecasting 5 years from now, so we're thinking, putting our 2026 hat on, what recommendations could you offer other institutions that would help prepare for the next 5 years in terms of reaching this concept of holistic student success?
Thanks, George. You know, we've actually been talking at UTA quite a bit about the shifts we're seeing in the labor market. And a lot of institutions are seeing a shift in terms of the volume of employee resignations or migration to other institutions, staff demand for flexibility, demand for higher pay, et cetera. And I think that's really been highlighted with the pandemic. So we have to have the talent we need to serve students well. It's not just about direct student supports. It's also about having talented staff to do that. And my advice would be to think about how we leverage technology. Sometimes the answer isn't always more staff, but it's more experienced staff and giving them more time on their hands to do the good work that they do. And technology can help us achieve some of that when it's deployed strategically. We also have to realize that difficult circumstances like a pandemic exacerbate equity gaps. So if you're going to be planning ahead, how are you going to be accounting for the fact that you really need to be spending more of your time and resources with the students that need it the most instead of applying one-size-fits-all services? And finally, I would say that innovation and disruption should be celebrated. It should be, you know, not only something that we're not afraid of, but something that we really empower our staff to do with things like seed grants. And we need to create an environment where we have early adoption of new practices and technologies, and managers have to support that early adoption. I'll close, George, with just an anecdote at UTA. Our OIT office was sort of disrupting our environment. We started using
OIT?
Office of Information Technology.
Thank you.
We started using Microsoft Teams many, many months in advance of the pandemic. And at the time, many of us were groaning, saying, this is just another thing I have to check on top of my email. I don't have time for this. Guess what? When the pandemic came, because we all learned to use it, we were far ahead of many of our peers and had institutions calling us, asking how we pivoted to virtual services and instruction so fast. So we have to embrace early adoption and support staff that want to try new things.
That's great. We're getting to the bewitching hour. I have sort of one last question to ask Samantha, but I did want to point out, for those of you who are following the chat box, Nadine Campbell from the University of Northern Caribbean is asking anybody who's interested in doing some partnering work with her institution to reach out. And I wanted to make sure that we can play that networking connection here. So Samantha, in a quick response, and then I may have an opportunity for everyone to respond to one final question. What ultimately made your institution decide to reinvest and continue your partnership in the area of mentoring with Mentor Collective for this coming year? What are you most excited about? And can you give me one or two things quickly?
Sure. Student response certainly was one of the reasons why we wanted to reinvest. Students were interested in doing this program, and frankly, we were losing some much needed transfer supports. Our foundations course we call FYE 101 is now part of our new general education curriculum and required by all first year students. So we had to pivot and reduce the number of, actually eliminate all of the transfer sections that we had. So mentor to mentor collective and transfer to transfer was the thing that helped continue that service to transfer students. What I'm most excited about, we hired an assistant director of transfer initiatives about a year ago, and she has just done amazing work with our transfer to transfer program, providing support to those mentors, helping to troubleshoot with mentees. And I can't wait to see where their program is going because of her support.
That's great. Helpful with that. Final question is a rapid fire round robin for all four of the panelists. And Brian, I'm going to ask you to kick it off. The pandemic has placed so much strain on leadership and often requiring rapid decisions to be made with no prior experience to draw upon. What insights have you gained from the experience that may help other senior leaders lead their institution into this continued uncertain future? And really, we're looking for just one or two ideas, quick response, so that all four panelists can weigh in on this. So Brian, why don't you start?
We can do anything. We can do a lot. Where we have historically thought we could not do things, we learned that we could. Changing how classes are offered and facility usage and the whole 9 yards, how we get and engage students as well as communities and their families. Here at UT Arlington, we're servicing the entire Arlington community with vaccinations and boosters. And, we are engaging and embracing the holistic community of the university. And we can do that. And we know we can do that now. It's a new normal. It's a new day.
That's great. Thank you. Charmaine, same question to you.
For me, I've learned creative ways to engage our students online. We've had a lot of students who talked about feeling isolated when the pandemic first started. So finding ways to do hangouts, game nights, informational webinars, meet and greets. I believe that these trends will continue in the future. So just being very creative and engaging our students and helping them get together.
Super. Ashley?
We need more opportunities to learn from peer institutions in real time. We should never be afraid to share more ideas with each other. We all have the same goal of helping students succeed. And it's hard sometimes to get others to answer questions sometimes or share, but we need to all support each other and do more of that because it's how we're all going to ultimately help our students succeed.
Yeah. Programs like this that you can participate in. We're seeing a lot of sharing taking place through the chat box here. Sam, we're going to give you the final word on that question. And before we wrap this portion of the program up, take a break and then lead into the second half of the program. So go ahead.
Yeah, I'll come at this a little bit differently. Someone said earlier, I think it might have been Ashley talking about empathy. And so I'm going to say lead with compassion. Remembering that we're not done yet. The pandemic is still here. It is still affecting us. It's affecting our students. It's affecting our employees. And as leaders, we need to remember that we're still all going through a traumatic experience. We've all been through a traumatic experience. And there's a lot of pressure to do more and serve better. And frankly, we're not providing a lot of support to our frontline folks. So that would be the number one thing I would recommend. Let's lead with compassion.
I appreciate that. And I appreciate you pointing out that it's not just our students, but it's our faculty and staff. It's our entire community. We've all been stressed. And some of the activities that Charmaine mentioned about doing with students could be helpful also doing with faculty and staff as we keep people engaged. I want to thank our panelists for the time flew by for me. I hope it flew by for those of you who were sitting in listening. The chat box is up and there are some really good engagements taking place there. We're going to go on a quick 5-minute break so you can hit the restroom, grab a cup of coffee or whatever. And when you come back, you're going to be in a small group. And we're going to have two guiding questions, and the group will be facilitated by a Mentor Collective employee. And those two questions are basically, and you'll see them once you get back into your group, how are you leveraging student voice to understand the shifts in students' hierarchy of needs? What resources and emerging tools are you leveraging to better support all dimensions of student well-being, whether it be academic, emotional, social, physical, professional? And as you're working through this in your small group, mentorship is one practice campuses are employing to affect college access and student success. Does the conversation exist at your campus? What obstacles do you see for students participating in a mentorship program or other types of programs that can help actively engage them? So we're going to be back at roughly 2:22, 5 minutes. When you come back, you will automatically be in your small group. Again, a big round of applause and a thank you to our panelists. I so enjoy, I feel like I'm getting a postdoc in higher ed admin every time I work with people like you. So thank you for your time and effort, and look forward to sitting in on the breakout groups. So we're on break. Unlike the rest of you get to sit in on most of the groups, that's both a plus and a negative, because just as things are really heating up, I get kicked out of one group and moved into another. But I want to take an opportunity to hear from some folks. And so I'm just going to randomly, one key idea, there were probably 8 or 10 that really popped out at each of these sessions, but one key idea that you think that the whole group would value hearing. And so, Vanessa, how about if we start with your group? One
Sure.
idea that you want to share.
Sure. I'd love Karen or Brandon to speak about their academic recovery and academic advocate program.
We can both do it, so I'll start. Here at the University at Albany in the spring of 2019, a group of faculty and professional staff members gather and created what we call the Academic Recovery Program, where we pair an advocate with a student who's struggling, meaning they're not either doing well academically or their GPA has fallen behind a 2.0. And so what that offers is additional support to our students. They pair with an advocate where they meet on a weekly basis and talk about everything. We approach it holistically. So we talk about academics, but we also talk about other barriers that we can help students with. In the program, we also partner with the School of Social Welfare. So we have a case management component to our program, and that's an additional layer of support. But we also have monthly meetings as advocates, as a group of 27 faculty and professional staff members on our campus, including the MSW interns. And Brandon, who oversees the program, brings a guest speaker every month, someone usually that works on our campus, either from the Counseling Center, Career Professional Services, Gender and Sexuality. But we get to know what other offices are doing and how we can work together collectively to support our students. The program.
Brandon, you want to just share if people are interested, because we're rapid fire. I apologize for cutting you off. Go ahead. But if you can share, if you're willing to share so that people can connect with you, that would be real helpful. If you put that in your contact, there you go. So if you want to learn more about that program, and one of the things that popped out of that for me was that they're using professional resources that exist on campus in their social work department to help them develop these kinds of programs. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Gretchen, how about a group that you sat in on?
Yeah, thanks, George. I actually sat in on group 4, and one of the things that I really loved about the conversation was just the overall context of how, when you start building this momentum, and when we start really thinking about the support that students need, oftentimes we're building the plane while we're flying it. That was a direct quote that came out of that, but that it's very important work and that it's not fluff work. And that's another part that really came out of it. I would love for if if Gina Firth was still on, for her to share a little bit about what you talked about through how when you get senior leadership on board, that really is something that helps to move this momentum forward.
Absolutely. Just really quick. I think the way you frame it is very important, and the bottom line is retention, because everybody can buy into that. So once you get your senior leadership to really understand that what we're talking about is super important, not only to them, but to our students, you can get them on board to prioritize the work that we're doing, because the sense of belonging and resiliency building is absolutely crucial to everybody on this campus, not only the students, but also us as employees.
That is real helpful. Thank you for framing it that way and framing it to the need of the people that you're talking with. And that came out in a couple of different sessions. It's got to be from the other need, not my own personal need to make this happen. Lisa, how about your group? I sat in on the tail end of that, and it sounded like there was some really good dialogue taking place. I picked up on a couple of things, the pet therapy program and the student leaders, but there were probably 4 or 5 other things. Is there one thing that you want to point out?
Yeah, there was one thing that Lori talked about and Michelle commented on, which is that all professions have these blind spots, and something that is like right there could really lead to a very important change in the well-being of our students. So Lori, if you could speak to that. And the other thing I was hoping you could mention is when we talked about mentoring was the mentoring map framework that you mentioned right at the end of our session, and then we got cut off. So Lori, over to you.
Yeah, sure. My grandson has joined me, so you might hear the challenge. But anyway, the point is we surveyed our students to find out how they were doing with online learning, and I'll go real quick. And we were trying to explore like what was going on that students didn't want to be on camera. And it turned out that we thought, because they I don't know, were doing other things, were in bed. But really, the students said after they left our campus and returned home that they were kind of embarrassed about their home environment. They didn't have a private place to learn. When they had the camera on, they were worried about siblings coming in and out and things like that. So we adapted some university rules, like, and stopped expecting our students who had to return home maybe to not the best study environment to have their cameras on. And that really helped us with attendance. So there was that one. And then the other thing was I just was commenting that I participated in that the coaches training for the National Center for Faculty Development and Diversity, or in the writing groups there. It's a fantastic organization, but they use a mentoring map as they develop young faculty, which I think is useful for my PhD students too, where you have a map where you surround yourself with mentors and, have a mentoring agreement with each mentor, depending on how long you need the mentor and what you need from that mentor. So it's really like targeted specific mentoring based on individual need. And it might be also to help you maintain some work-life balance. Like the map itself helps you realize, like, I might be light on maybe some community interaction versus, schoolwork. So it helps, the mentoring map helps you to establish some work-life balance as well.
And there's it looks like somebody just Eli put in a URL to take you to sort of the framework for mentoring mapping. So in the chat box. So take a look at that. That's real helpful. Thank you very much. Gretchen, I'm going to go back to you for the other group that you sat in on.
I was with them for just a very brief moment. So I kind of caught the tail end of the conversation. But one of the challenges that kind of came up with the supporting mentorship programs was just really, how are we supporting the mentors that are in this role, and how are we giving them opportunities to learn more about what it means to be a mentor, giving them opportunities to say, hey, this is too much on my plate, or I need to have a better understanding of this side of the house and how to support students. And so really kind of looking at it from that perspective. I don't know if Shantae Clarkson is still on, but she's shared a little bit about some of the work on a positive note that they are doing in a smaller cohort through her department supporting some scholarship students.
Tay, are you still with us?
I am, and I will try to get this in the next minute or two. I do have a hard stop for a meeting that starts in a minute or so, but thanks for the opportunity. Yes, we have about 15 faculty and staff mentors that serve all of a group of students that are selected for certain scholarships that come into the university. And they follow those students all the way through their 4 years and serve as mentors. They teach a seminar that's similar to a first-year experience, except it is tailored to the students in those particular scholarship groups every fall semester. And they also work with success coaches that are assigned to all of those students as well. And so our office, the Student Success Office, offers training and support and resources to all of the faculty and staff mentors that serve those students. We meet once a month. We also meet with them individually to discuss student issues that may come up in regards to their students' progress. It's a very close working group, and it is working very well here on the campus.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And you raised the topic of making sure that we feed the mentors emotionally, socially, to help them because they're doing a lot of the legwork, and it's important that we connect with them. We are just about out of time. I just sent an apology note to Nicole because we're not going to be able to pull her group in at this point in time. I want to hand it over to my host, Vanessa, and say thank you to the panelists, but more importantly, thank you to all of you who participated. The conversations and the dialogue was fantastic that I got an opportunity to engage in. So thank you for adding to my toolkit. I hope you all took something away from this, and I'll turn it back over to Vanessa.
Well, you're turning it back over to me. I get to have all of the turnovers. Yeah. So Vanessa and I often one another. So we both have red curly hair. We both have bubbly personalities. It happens. I will be Vanessa on any day and be grateful for it. As those of you that are still on here, if you want to learn more information about how Mentor Collective can support your work, please feel free to raise your hand using the reaction little tab thingy there that's on the bottom. That is, yes, the technical term for it, tab thingy. And somebody will be in contact with you. Looking ahead, we have got some great things coming up after the start of the new year. So things to kind of keep a lookout for are some of the in-person conferences that will be coming up in January and February. And then we are still finalizing our upcoming roundtables for the first part of the year. So be on the lookout for those notifications. And in the meantime, keep up the good work that you're doing. We are so grateful you were able to join us today. And yes, somebody brought the baby into the picture. Thank you. And have a great rest of your day. Bye now.
What the most interesting segment it has been on tonight's episode of AAA Live. We look forward to welcoming you again on Wednesday to our program, 8 to 9 p.m. So you can follow, and subscribe to us in all our social media platforms on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. So this has been your host, Attorney Amian April M. Alcazar, PhD, and we hope to see you again next week, 8 to 9 p.m. on Wednesday. So stay safe, everyone, and good evening.